I have to preface this video by saying that I had thought of making the video on how Bollywood perpetuates the idea of men, but at that time the majority of my audience were women. However, now that more guys are watching my videos, I decided to conclude the Bollywood video essays that I have. I also have to say that by making this video, I'm definitely not denying the biological differences between men and women. And I'm definitely not trying to minimize the consequences that women have to go through because of the toxic ideas perpetuated by Bollywood. I have made a video on why Bollywood hates women to address all of those problems. Make sure you check all 3 videos before you watch this one. I will be linking them in the description box down below. The video on how Bollywood distorts people's ideas of men is the 4th and final part to my video essays on Bollywood. So without any further ado, let's get started with the video. The first way that Bollywood distorts people's ideas of men is through hypermasculinity. I have to start by giving the definition of what hypermasculinity is. According to Britannica.com, the definition of hypermasculinity is as follows. Hypermasculinity is a sociological term denoting exaggerated forms of masculinity, virility, and physicality. Scholars have suggested that there are 3 distinct characteristics associated with the hypermasculine personality: the view of violence as manly, the perception of danger as exciting and sensational, and callous behavior toward women and a regard toward emotional displays as feminine. The men that are usually portrayed in mainstream Bollywood are hypermasculine and hyper bad boy. That boy is also an adorable sexual assaulter. One of the examples for this hypermasculine man is Tiger Shroff from the movie Heropanti. He's hypermuscular and he's very assertive when it comes to approaching women. He warns his friends from talking anything weird about his crush by saying that "Tumhari bhabhi hai," which means she's your sister-in-law. You guys better not say anything weird about her. He also sexually assaults her by sneaking into his crush's room and sexually assaulting her. What he does is, in the dark, he gently touches her stomach. In the same movie, the hero saves the girl by beating up the goons who are about to rape the heroine. So when the hero sexually assaults the girl, it's cute, but when someone else does it, it's cry. Got it. Similarly, in the Dabangg movie, Salman Khan is very brash, loud, and aggressive. His aggression and lack of respect for his love interest is shown clearly through the line "प्यार से दे रहे रख लो वरना थप्पड़ मार के भी दे सकते हैं," which means I'm giving it lovingly. Keep it, or else I can also slap you so that you'll have to take the money forcefully. Salman Khan in the Dabangg movie series is hyper-violent, hyper-aggressive, and hyper-arrogant. Somehow both these movies and other movies like the aforementioned movies make me think that in mainstream Bollywood, violence is synonymous with masculinity. In both the movies that I mentioned before, the male characters are violent and can beat up many goons in one go like an experienced martial artist or Superman. They perceive danger as exciting and sensational and finally behave horribly towards their love interest. The funny thing is, if other men treat their love interest horribly in these movies, those men are beaten brutally by the male protagonist. But when the male protagonists treat their love interest horribly, it is often painted as something very endearing. So what harms do the trope of hypermasculinity bring? Big harms to men and women. I have talked about the harms that it does to women in my previous video, so I'll talk about the harms that it does to men. These movies teach men that as long as you quote-unquote love any woman, sexual assault is fine. This leads to men getting very mixed signals about consent. It also teaches that men being violent is absolutely fine because apparently men are not real men without them being violent. We often talk about the self-esteem of women when we're discussing about pop culture, but we often forget the remaining half of the population. Hypermasculine men in movies can also lead to men having low self-esteem because the only men that they see on screen are the buff, muscular ones, while in real life, only a minority of men look like that. This will lead a lot of men to feel undesirable. In a society like South Asia, where men and women dating itself is a huge taboo, women will idolize these kinds of men and will have unrealistic expectations for men. Finally, it also teaches men that after you're with a woman, you can treat her however you want. This will lead to various couples being very unsatisfied in their relationships because they're both projecting the idea of ideal man and woman on each other rather than accepting their flaws and loving them for who they are. The second trope that Bollywood likes to use that harms men is the ridicule and stereotyping of homosexual men. I'm sure everyone here can remember watching a Bollywood movie where homosexual men were used as the butt of the joke. They are stereotyped as men who have a limp hand, extremely effeminate, and sexual harassers. And in most movies, the term quote-unquote gay is used in a very derogatory way. There is a movie Dostana, which means friendship in English, where the mother gets terrified when she hears that her son is gay. There are several other movies where queer men are portrayed extremely inappropriately. This reinforces the society's beliefs that people have about gay men and as a result brings the marginalization of homosexual men. All of the men in mainstream Bollywood movies are heterosexual men. Representation in popular media is extremely important because when people have someone to relate to, their existence gets validated and they'll have someone to look up to. When you see representation in the media and you see a gay man, you'll be like, thank God, you'll be happy that you're not alone, right? Unfortunately, even if there are homosexual men in a movie, they're usually ridiculed. When homosexual men watch these hypermasculine men on the screen being portrayed as the desirable guy, it can lead homosexual men to feel that they are undesirable. The third way that Bollywood distorts the idea of men is through toxic masculinity. The definition of toxic masculinity, according to dictionary.com, is a cultural concept of manliness that glorifies stoicism, strength, virility, and dominance, and that is socially maladaptive or harmful to mental health. Bollywood's toxic masculinity can be phrased in a single sentence, "Mard ko dard nahi hota," which can be translated as "men don't get hurt." Most male protagonists in mainstream Bollywood movies exhibit toxic masculinity, and any men that deviate from this stringent criterion of masculinity is considered to be less of a man or emasculated. The best example of toxic masculinity is Salman Khan's Dabangg movies. He's very aggressive, loud, and coercive. He does whatever he wants in those movies, and the mere fact that Dabangg movies were a huge box office hit is a very concerning thing. Salman Khan in real life is an extremely messed up individual with a lot of horrible accusations against him. Despite his very checkered past, he is still worshipped by his fans. I would like to liken his fans to a cult where he is the leader of the cult. Another example of toxic masculinity in mainstream Bollywood movies is Kabir Singh. And I'm not here to debate how good the movie is and how good job Shahid Kapoor did as Kabir Singh. I'm here to point out the traits of toxic masculinity in that movie. Kabir Singh is violent, aggressive, and angry all the time, and finally he mistreats his love interest. This movie also was a huge box office hit. If men watch this movie as a story of a flawed individual and don't try to emulate whatever they saw on the screen, I don't think that there is a problem with that. However, considering the fact that Bollywood movies literally dictate how we love and how we perceive the opposite sex, I think there will be a lot of men who will emulate Kabir Singh's behavior in their life. I think the reason why this movie faced all of the backlash that it did is because people criticizing this movie thought that Kabir Singh's behaviors will be carried out in real life. I would also like to mention that one of my friends mentioned that her girlfriends were posting on social media how they wanted boyfriends like Kabir Singh. I kid you not. Since movies like Kabir Singh become a box office hit, a huge box office hit, other production companies will invest into similar projects to make large profits as long as the audience keeps watching it, and it could be for years that people keep watching movies like Kabir Singh. This will completely distort the idea of masculinity that any man and woman has. In order to get women, it's possible that men will change their behaviors to be more like Kabir Singh, and women will equate her significant other's horrible behavior to her significant other just being a man. The other way how Bollywood distorts the idea of men is by dichotomizing how men are. In the movie Koi Mil Gaya, the male protagonist is mentally disabled and henceforth is mentally 12 to 13 years old, but looks like he is in his early 20s. However, he gradually transforms into this quote-unquote alpha male, and every time it is shown that the alpha male is better than the beta male, alpha being the muscular guy and beta being the one with the mental disability. Yes, he does go back to his mentally young self in the end, but he still has the physical traits of the alpha male with him, and he does get the girl. Rather than giving a heart-touching story on how a guy with a mental disability overcomes all odds to get his goal, they decided to make the guy super buff to get the girl at the expense of people who have the same mental disability. Throughout this movie, it is shown that the alpha male is better than the beta male. Another example is the movie Rab Ne Bana Di Jodi, which means God made us a couple. In this movie, one guy is the docile, nerdy character who can't assert himself, while the other character is super chill and more like an alpha male. I do have to say that the nerdy guy gets the girl in the end, but I have a problem with the dichotomy of men that this movie provides. In this movie, there is the simp. He is ignored by his wife at all times. She even tells him that she will never be able to love him, which in real life is a huge red flag. However, because he's completely smitten by the woman, he does not object to that. In order to be loved by his wife, he completely transforms into this macho guy and he's able to get her attention. The muscular hunk, however, has a personality as opposed to the simp. And of course, she falls for the macho one because he has an actual personality. And this is the problem that I have with this movie. Either there is the simp who does everything for the woman, or there's the other guy who's the exact opposite to the simp. In the Western world, men being simps and waiting for women to shower a little bit of attention towards them are looked down on. However, in Bollywood, men who pine for women's attention are romanticized. Since we talked about the dichotomized idea of men that Bollywood sells, we have now arrived to the point of alpha male and beta male. Basically, alpha male is the one with all the traits of toxic masculinity, while beta male is the exact opposite to that. Alpha male is always sold to women as a desirable man, and beta male is a sissy, when in reality, both of them are a problem. Alpha males have all the traits of toxic masculinity, while the entire world revolves around the woman for the beta male. And neither of them are good people to be in a relationship with. Romanticizing alpha male might lead to men treating their significant other horribly, and romanticizing beta males might lead men in South Asia to be more like a simp, rather than being with women who will respect them and make them grow. So both of them are extremes. Since Bollywood is selling two types of men, women will have only two types of men in their heads. They will judge men according to that viewpoint, and men will have a very hard time fulfilling the demands that women have. They will also have a hard time pretending to be someone on the screen rather than being themselves. The reality is, a healthy relationship requires respect between both the people involved rather than one person having power over the other. In a relationship where there's the alpha male has the power over the woman, and where if there's a beta male, the woman has the power over the beta male. Dichotomized viewpoint of anything is a horrible idea, but giving a very polarized viewpoint on people is even worse. Every man, like every woman, is different in their own way. Men watching my video, I'd like to tell you that there is no surefire way to be a man. As long as you're comfortable in yourself as a man, you recognize your mistakes and are willing to grow, that should suffice. The final trope, and the most important trope that Bollywood loves to sell, is the ridicule of men when they're sexually assaulted. There are several movies where men are sexually assaulted by women, and those scenes are portrayed in a very comedic manner. There are even scenes in some Bollywood movies where homosexual men are sexually harassing straight men, and this is also played for laughs. What's worse is the fact that no one is willing to talk about the sexual harassment experiences that men go through. In our current society, when women come out with their stories of getting sexually harassed and assaulted, they're more often than not believed. When it comes to women, they have movements like the #MeToo movement, where women come out with their stories. But when men come out with their stories, they're often ridiculed, they're called gay, and when men are sexually assaulted by women, guys often say, "You must have had fun." We should encourage more men to come out and speak out about their stories. Unfortunately, men find it a very hard time to speak out because according to Bollywood, "Mard ko dard nahi hota," which means men do not feel pain. When men get ridiculed for their horrible experiences, they suppress their emotions, and suppressing your emotions can lead to depression. Just because they're men does not mean that they like being sexually violated. Just because they're men and they have a higher sexual drive than women does not mean that they like to be sexually violated by women. Consent goes both ways. If a woman's no is no, then a man's no is also no. Now I would like to share how my opinions on men have changed over the last 7 years. Like on women, I also had a very polarizing viewpoint on men. I thought there were just two types of men. Either they're the bad guy type and they're injured, mentally, they have some sort of a trauma and they want someone's help, or the nerdy guy who's basically boring. Now that I'm 25 and I've been outside my country, I've met numerous amazing men. Some were extremely sensitive, some gentlemanly, some insensitive, and some outright arrogant. But what I now believe about men is completely different to what I felt about men when I was a teenager. I now believe that men are all on a spectrum like all women. They have their flaws and their strengths like all women. I think we should really think about the problems that men go through like we talk about women's problems. Suicide rate for men is higher than suicide rate for women in the world. Rather than asking men to suck it up, we should ask men to open up about their emotions and share their negative experiences with people. I remember Terry Crews, he came out with his story about being sexually assaulted by a Hollywood producer, if I'm not wrong, and he was ridiculed by Wendy Williams, which was a very disappointing thing to hear because men often have a hard time coming out with their stories, and when they have this kind of reaction towards their stories, men will be discouraged to speak out. And ladies and men, if any man is willing to open up to you, please listen to them. Only then the relationship between men and women can be better and we can be united and work for a better world together. I know this is a very idealistic viewpoint of mine, and I'm expecting something, very ideal, but I can hope, right? I tried to do research on how Bollywood affects men, and unfortunately I didn't find a lot of articles. When I searched the same thing for women, I found tons of things, but when it comes to men, nothing. So I think this kind of says a lot about our society, how we tend to forget the half of the population when it comes to their problems. I think it's often because men do not speak up, but I think it's also because men are discouraged to speak up because they're made fun of. So guys, please listen to men if they're coming out with their stories, because I think it might be more difficult for them to be vulnerable in front of other people. And thank you so much for watching all of my videos. I can't believe my Bollywood video essays have become kind of popular. Like my first video, why is love in Bollywood so cringy? That video has gotten more than 100 views, which is amazing. So thank you very much for supporting me. Thank you people who subscribe to my channel. I can't really thank you enough. And if you don't see much more video essays in the future, it's because my laptop is impossible when it comes to exporting videos. It takes 3 hours. Sometimes it can take the entire night to export a video essay that's around 30 minutes long. On the contrary, when I use my phone, it just takes around 15 minutes to render a 30-minute video and full HD quality. And yeah, this is why I am very uncomfortable doing more video essays, because I have to wait for a long time for the video to get exported. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want a link to my Instagram, because I usually have video updates on my Instagram, so please follow my Instagram so that you'll be updated on what's going on with the videos. And if you have some suggestions, please let me know in the comments down below. I think next time I'll be showing my face. So saying this much, I would like to conclude this video. Thank you very much, guys. Bye bye. I'll see you next time.